Good morning, Richard Fulmer here, and welcome to another Richard's Rock Rambles live albums. So today we're going to have a look at a band from the States. Started out late 60s, going to the 70s, and they were kind of that proto-metal beginning thing in the States. The bands were starting to get a little heavier. You've had your Summer of Love from 67 with the bands like Grateful Dead and Jefferson Aeroplane, and guys were getting a little heavier. And we're talking about the band Grand Funk. Grand Funk Railroad in the beginning, and then later on they just changed it to Grand Funk. These guys were alongside bands like Blue Cheer, Iron Butterfly, Cream from the UK, Jimi Hendrix Experience. They were just a little bit heavier, a bit more adventurous. They were never the darlings of the critics, but hey, who are the critics? It was the people that counted, and they came to see them in their droves. The first, I would reckon, 5 or 6 albums of Grand Funk all went gold, some went platinum, so the sales were there. They famously sold out Shea Stadium in the States quicker than the Beatles. And that takes some doing. I've seen clips from that concert and it was amazing. So the live album I'm going to talk about today is simply entitled Grand Funk Railroad Live. There was a later live album in I think 75 or 76, which was called Caught in the Act. That was a slightly more polished affair, with a lot more happening in the studio. This album that we're going to chat about today is just, that's it, it's live. There was no mixing done. What you hear on this record is how it happened on the day. And when you listen to this record, it's almost as if you're sitting in that crowd and you've got that band in front of you and it's just pumping. These guys were a serious power trio. For me, one of the best power trios ever to come out of the rock world, especially in the early 70s. I mean, there were other bands like Cactus, but for me, Grand Funk just had something extra. And the clue there is in their name, funk. These guys had a lot of swing to their sound. There was a lot of soul involved, especially in the singer Mark Farner, guitarist, and he played the harmonica. He was the main driving force in the band, alongside Mel Shasser, or Shacher, I'm not quite sure how you say his surname, on bass, and a great drummer by the name of Don Brewer, who also did some lead vocals on particular songs and then backing vocals as well with others. Don Brewer and Mel Shacher are still in the band, Grand Funk. They're still touring around the States. I don't think they do too much touring outside of the States, especially now with COVID. But they haven't recorded anything for, well, I think since the 80s when Grand Funk reunited for 2 albums that weren't that great. So yeah, they haven't done any recording, but they are still a going concern. And I think one of the members in the band is Bruce Kulick, the guy that used to play for Kiss on guitar. So he kind of takes the place of Mark Farner. For me personally, it would be great if Mark Farner could get back with the guys. There was a big breakup, so they could kiss and make up and just get back together for perhaps one final tour. But we'll have to see. So let's have a look at this album. It was recorded at the Jacksonville Coliseum and not as stated on the album at the Atlanta International Pop Festival. So that's been a bit of confusion over the years. So in fact, it wasn't at that concert, although it says so in the inside sleeve of the vinyl. And it was between the 23rd and the 25th of June 1970 when all those great concerts were happening. I mean, the year before you had Woodstock. You also had the Isle of Wight in 1970, so that was the days of the festivals. And it was released on November the 16th, 1970. Yeah, I remember getting this as a teenager, and it just blew me away. It was just so visceral and in your face, nothing subtle about it, and the songs just blew out of the speakers. So in the band, you got Mark Farner, like I mentioned. He was on guitar, vocals, keyboards and harmonica. So he did quite a bit on stage before they got a permanent keyboardist. Mel Shacher on bass, Don Brewer in drums and vocals. Excuse me. They had a very different singing style. Mark Farner's was a bit more of a range to his voice. Don Brewer did more of the sort of shouty vocals, very aggressive singer, a lot of growl to his voice. And the album was produced by Terry Knight, who was their manager for all the early albums and this live one, I think right up until the album Phoenix. And then they had a big fallout, and of course there were a lot of litigations after that, and they went to court against him, and that's a whole nother story. So let me show you this album. This is the iconic cover, Grand Funk live album, and it's Mark Farner in the front there. There's Don Brewer, and there's Mel Schacher just in front of the bass, just in front of the amps. I mean, how's that for a live shot? If you have a live album, you want a decent cover, and there you have one. And the back, there's the amp, which is just amazing. You know, when I used to get these vinyls, I spend hours just looking at the covers. And then the inside, there's a great live shot, if you can see that. Mark Farner in the middle, Mel Schacher with his bass, and there's Don Brewer behind a pretty small drum kit, but he could make use of that drum kit. I mean, he's a serious drummer. So it says here, Atlanta International Pop Festival, July the 5th, 1970, but in fact it wasn't. This photograph may have been from the Atlanta, but the recording itself was done at Jacksonville Coliseum. So they reissued all the Grand Funk CDs, all the Grand Funk albums, I should say, in the early 2000s. And it was done from Capitol Records, and I think it was released by EMI at the time. And so this is the remastered live CD. On the studio albums, they have added bonus tracks, but on this live album, it's exactly the same as the vinyl. So there's no extra tracks on here. It has been digitally remastered, a 24-bit digital remaster. Early in the morning, I needed to wet my whistle. So what do you have here? You've got introduction, and there's just, you can hear the crowd are just roaring for Grand Funk. We want Grand Funk. It was just amazing. And then it gets into the track, Are You Ready? A great rock track with some blistering guitar work from Mark Farner. I mean, he wasn't a flashy sort of Satriani type player, could do the riffs, but when he did do lead breaks, he had a style all of his own. And Don Brewer on the drums, awesome player, very loud drummer, nothing subtle about Don Brewer. And Mel Schacher's bass was turned up to almost 11 on the amps. It was so loud. Even on the studio albums, you can hear that the bass was right up front, which is what I really dig about power trios from that era. Then you go into Paranoid, not the Black Sabbath Paranoid. This is the Grand Funk Paranoid with some great wah-wah guitar from Mark Farner. In Need, Heartbreaker, which was a huge hit for them at the time. Early 70s, these guys were selling albums hand over fist. And that particular track, In Need, and Heartbreaker, I should say, that was a big hit. Words of Wisdom, which is sort of Mark talking to the audience, telling them about staying away from the bad drugs. These guys were totally anti-drugs, which is quite strange for the period. I mean, if you think all the other guys were doing the drugs, these guys were very anti. And that goes into Mean Mistreater, which is actually a very mellow track with Mark Farner on the keyboards. And that's a song about drugs and the pitfalls and how, you know, staying away from it and all the rest of it. Then it says Mark Says All Right, and that's basically Mark Farner standing in front of the mic just before the next thing screams, all right. And then they go into the track TNUC. Yeah, if you spell it the other way, you get a different word. And that is a showcase for Don Brewer on the drums. Incredible drumming from him on that track. If you think, like I said, he had a very small kit, but he was so active. And yeah, he really gets into it on that drum solo, and you can hear he sort of call and response to the audience as well. Then they're going to probably my favorite track of Grand Funk, especially from the early period of their career, Inside Looking Out, which is a lengthy piece which has about 3 different sections to it. And here is where you can hear the funk, the swing, the soulful side of them. Although there's hard rocking as well, it's got some soul to it. Mark Farner does quite a bit on the harmonica, which is amazing, and a really interesting lead guitar break towards the end. And that song was originally done by the Animals. Now, if you listen to the Animals version and then you listen to this, totally different beast. These guys really tore it up on this album. And then the whole thing ends with the track Into the Sun, which is a lengthy track, I think on the original vinyl. Yeah, that's the whole of side 4. So, and that's 12 minutes and 10 seconds. And the TNUC was 11 minutes. So, and Inside Looking Out is 12 minutes. So there were a few long tracks on here, which is great. You know, the guys sort of spread out, have a bit of a jam on stage, which always makes things a little interesting. So on this remastered version, there's a few more things inside that I can show you. Let's see if there's anything here. That's just the CD. And then if we look inside, there's the whole story of how it all came about and the producer and getting the whole thing together. There's the rest of the story. Not much to show you there. And there's that same shot that you get with the vinyl. The guys on stage. I love that shot. I always wanted to have this in a big poster. Yeah, that pretty much tells you about the tracks. And let's see if there's anything. Here we go. This is so here you have the Circus magazine in the States, which I'm not sure is still going today. They were on the cover of that. They were on the cover of Hit Parader, and that is a Spanish single from the 1971. These guys were doing things all over the world. And I think there were some Japanese singles released as well at the time. So yeah, that's pretty much it in the booklet. Excellent live album. As I say, it's raw, it's in your face. It's what I want a live album to be. You know, you want to feel as if you're there and the guys are really just kicking out and doing their thing. And they were one of the best live acts, I think, from that early 70s period. You know, there were other bands like the MC5 that were very fiery on stage. Obviously, Led Zeppelin was starting out. They'd been going for about a year or so. So it was the glory days of live acts in rock. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed that. Any comments, please, down below. Any thumbs up if you can. That'll be great. Subscribe if you haven't. And next time around on the live albums, we're going to have a look at a UK band. Sadly, no longer together. They, in fact, had their last concerts, I think, about a year ago. We're talking about UFO. And the live album we're going to be talking about is Strangers in the Night. And it's probably one of the best live albums ever. In fact, on another channel here on YouTube, Sea of Tranquility, with Pete Pardo, I think he had a whole live album competition, and they came out at #1. The best live album voted by all the viewers. So yeah, it's definitely one to check out. But we'll have a look at that next time. Have a great week. Take it easy, look after yourselves, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers.